Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for coming to yet another Wednesday Lowy Lunch Club lecture. This week we're talking about the need for a global response to gender-based violence, particularly focusing in on the Kivu province of Congo and how to address that there. We're talking about how to deal with one of the greatest blights on humanity that takes place all the time, and our presenter, Lyn Lusi, works right at the coalface of dealing with this through the Heal Africa organization, which has been around for 11 years and deals with trying to help the victims of gender-based violence as an instrument of war, something that is clearly a major problem that even being far away in Australia we might not think about very often, but I'm sure after today's lunch we'll think about it a little bit more. Lyn, please.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for inviting me. Well, I wonder if you've ever had the disturbing experience of standing between two people who are determined to slug it out, to have a good fight. I think every parent knows what it's like when two kids are swinging at each other and one's shouting at you, "He started it," and you say, "No, she hit me first." Well, I think this is what we had an experience like this quite recently at Heal Africa. There you have Mrs. Clinton, and around her are people working in the area of sexual violence. And this was a dialogue that I was refereeing. She put sexual violence against women in Congo on the top of her Africa agenda. And the world sat up and took notice. But she said, I'm quoting her now, she said, "The future ultimately of the Congolese people is up to the Congolese people." And now, the participants around the round table said, "No. The problem of Congo," I'm quoting some of the women who are speaking around the table, "the problems of Congo are international problems, not just Congolese problems. Many Western countries really manipulate certain neighboring countries because they want to take the resources here. So if they want to explore our minerals, let them do it legally and adequately so that the Congolese reap the benefits of our riches." Another said, "There's a lack of commitment, political commitment, of regional leaders in the Great Lakes region. They don't want to stop the situation that's been going on for the last 15 years. Now, I'm not impartial. I wasn't an impartial referee. I quite agree with all the speakers around the table. Our attempts at establishing a democratic and decentralized accountable government have really been sabotaged by the war in the east of the country, and it sucks every resource out of the government's resources. It deprives the economy of more than 60% of its revenues. The problems of Congo have been created and maintained, in our opinion in Congo, for the purpose of exploiting minerals and seizing land and resources." Well, there's nothing new in that, but there is a hopeful sign now that the attention on our problems has been focused through the visit of Mrs. Clinton. There's also a very hopeful sign in the lobbying that our partners CNEC have been mobilizing over the last 2 years. People are becoming aware of this problem, particularly since we first launched our film Lumo, and the advocacy campaign that has really been bearing fruit. Now, I wonder if you are familiar with the chaotic history of the past 50 years of DR Congo. I'm not going to read it all, but since 1960, which was the year of independence from Belgium, we've had civil war. We had a totalitarian regime, and after the end of the Cold War, things again fell apart in the country. This is just a list of wars. In 2002, July 2002, the Sun City peace process began. And in 2005, there was a referendum on the new constitution. 2006, elections for Kabila to come to power. But through to the present day, from 2006 to today, there has been continued fighting in the east. In Ituri, in North Kivu and South Kivu. And there has been lucrative involvement of foreign powers and globalized business interests. And the various peace agreements never seem to hold up against the interests of big business that is behind the exploitation of these mineral resources. At the present time, in the east of the country, there are over 1 million IDPs, internally displaced people. And sexual violence is rampant. It's one of the motors of the displacement. Political analysts call Congo a failed state. I thought this was just a slogan, but apparently there's a genuine definition of what a failed state is. It means the loss of physical control over territory, the loss of the monopoly on the legitimate use of physical force within a territory, erosion of legitimate authority to make collective decisions, and an inability to provide reasonable public services, and an inability to interact with other states as a full member of the international community. Well, on all counts, Congo is a failed state. So how much responsibility do the Congolese bear? How much responsibility does the international community bear? Have you any idea what that is? This is an airplane. Inside the airplane that can normally carry, it's 8 tons. That's about all it can carry. It's overweight. And what's in those bags? It's tantalite. Colombo tantalite is what we call coltan. And it's an extremely heavy ore. It melts at around 1,000 degrees centigrade. But when you've extracted it, you can beat it so thin, it's just unbelievably thin. It's whisper thin. And it's an incredibly strong semiconductor. So ideal mineral for the weapons, for international space race. No, there isn't a race now, but the international space exploration, electronics, and particularly the biggest consumer now are the iPhones, our communication technology. Now, this stuff is mined in a region near Walikale. There's a big hill that is completely honeycombed now with tunnels where people go in to bring out the tantalite. This particular area, Bisie, is under the control of a military commander. Funny thing was, he was Rwandan. He then became CNDP. Now he's been integrated into the national government. Nothing has changed for that population. He is the warlord that controls that area. I've seen the stuff come out of the plane loaded onto unmarked trucks. Where do they go? This is our challenge. Where do they go? And the consequences. Can you see who is standing behind these women? Military are everywhere, and these women live their lives in terror. If they function at all, they are living in terror, but most of the time they are chased away by sexual violence. Here's a picture of some of the women who have come into our hospital. They come by the busload with their terrible injuries from sexual violence, sexual torture. The cruelty that is applied to this depopulation policy, it's unbelievable. Here's one girl who unfortunately recognized her rapist, and the result was they destroyed her eyes. She's brought in now blind, raped, and later we discovered also, very sadly, infected with HIV. Here's another huge social problem. One little girl, 13-year-old girl, who has no future now apart from looking after a baby of rape. And these are the social problems that cause people now to run into immense camps, displaced people's camps. This is a camp just outside Goma at Buhima. And in the background you can see the hills of Masisi, where they've run from. One of the most fertile places in our nation that used to be the breadbasket of the whole country. And now these people are living on handouts from the World Food Programme. And you might know that the World Food Programme has just recently made an appeal to the world. Their contributions have gone down so much that they are cutting all of their programs, some of them by as much as 50%. And because the government has said, oh, we're on the way to peace, one of the programs that has been cut is the program for DR Congo by 50%. The result for us is immediately felt. We have no more, they have cut off food for children with disabilities who are cared for in our hospital. And where people in this camp used to get 6 kilos of food a week, they're now going to get 3 kilos of food a week. They have no other resources. Here's an indicator from a study done by Asrames. It was done in 2004, so I don't think the trend has made any move towards improvement. But this is the evolution of average daily per capita income in North Kivu. Already in 2000, it was very low, well below the poverty line. But the trend has just been downwards, and it has not gone up since that study was done. The country has done its due diligence to try and understand what's going on in the mining sector. When the old President Kabila took power, he set up a commission to review mining rights, mining contracts, the Lutundula Commission. Then, as you know, before too long, he was removed by assassination, and his young 29-year-old son was put in place as the president. The United Nations also did a report on illegal exploitation of minerals, and that was from 2001, the panel of experts. You can access these reports easily on the website. Just type in illegal exploitation of minerals of DRC. It will come up, and you can read the names of the companies and the individuals who were named at that time. Now, maybe they're different now, because they changed their names, they changed the names of their companies, and other people come into play. But the disturbing fact is that they are all international, reputable companies who are involved in this mining. The German Development Bank, called KfW, did a study in 2007 to try and find out where are all of these resources going? How much should the country be producing, and how much revenue should the country be getting? The value of the production in 2005 was estimated at 4,500 million, that's $4.5 billion US dollars. That's the value of production. So the potential receipts of the state for that year should have been 390 million. How much did they actually get? They had the figures for 2004, probably not so different from 2005, probably around 5% of that or less. So where is the rest going? It's all going over the borders illegally. Now, there have been attempts at regulation. Marcus Wagner, who is one of the authors of the previous report that I quoted, he has been pushing for certified trading chains in mineral production. I was at a workshop in Bonn last December where they were working out the details of how this agreement would happen. I was just there by chance. I was accompanying somebody else and just happened to be there by chance. And what struck me then was there's a private company promoting this certification. They're putting up the money for a pilot project, a German company. And it happened to be the same German company that was criticized in the public arena for buying up what they called blood coltan from Congo. Now, they are now promoting a certification process. And where do you think they are going to pilot this certification process? In Rwanda. Doesn't that make you feel a little bit suspicious? because Rwanda has very little coltan, and the huge reserves of coltan are in Congo. And I think this tells us, this rings bells in my mind, we should be looking more closely at what we call a certification process. The Senators Durbin and Brownback from the United States Senate came to visit us 2 years ago, and they've also been pushing very hard for certification of the origin of metals from conflict regions. There's a bill before the Senate now to require American companies to state where their products come from. But again, with the certification process that is so untransparent, so opaque, you wonder whether it is going to actually mask the corruption or actually bring light on the situation. When I was asked to speak here, they asked me a question: are women better off or worse off because of globalization? Are the women of Congo better off or worse off? Now, I wish there were a simple answer to that question. It's a very simple question. I was once trying to explain the Congolese conflict to some visitors around my table in the evening, and they said, "This is just too complicated. Just tell us who are the good guys and who are the bad guys." And very often we are looking for a simple solution. We don't want to look at the complexities of the question. And a lot of the problems that we're facing now are some deep and intractable questions because we have always been unwilling to face complexities. We want short answers. We come up with the answers: shoot them, or ban them, or build a wall and keep them out. These are the sort of answers that we like for our problems. So what about globalization and mining? Is it good for Congolese people or is it bad for them? My answer obviously is yes and no. It's good, it's bad. Any intervention that promotes a ban on purchasing Congolese coltan, for example, would leave hundreds of families in desperate poverty. But because there's no control over the exploitation and the export of these minerals, the mining areas can still be kidnapped by warlords, and the traffic from sales feeds the illegal cycle of arms trade. It promotes war, it promotes rape, displacement, hunger, desperation, and the ongoing cycle of revenge. So does that concern us in Australia? Hardly at all, really. If you follow the origin of all the ingredients of any of our consumer items, they probably come from a dozen different countries. And the capital that finances these industries comes from thousands of different investors. Maybe you, maybe me, if we've bought unit trusts. We are only concerned with the income from our unit trust. We don't want to be bothered by the management issues underlying the investments. We take it on trust, unit trusts, we trust them. And because we like simple solutions to complex questions, we don't seem to have the will to deal with the ethical issues of globalized investment. And how can we regulate what fund managers do with our money? Voluntary regulation never seems to work, especially not in an industry that's making a fortune. Would these industries really choose to limit their profits because of ethical issues? And especially if no one's asking the questions. And even worse, if no one would really understand the answers if you got them. There's also the problem that no country can tackle this issue of regulation alone. Global issues like these need a global response. And I think so often we're paralyzed now because we all feel helpless. We feel that so few people understand how the global economy really works, and that's an excuse enough for us to do nothing. Individual cases of injustice really can mobilize us to action. When I show you the pictures of the women, you feel like you want to do something. But when you talk about the complexities of the underlying forces, economic forces that are fueling this issue, then we just fold our hands. What can we do about it? I wonder if you've ever read the book King Leopold's Ghost. Has anybody heard of that book? It's a very interesting book that details how one man in the late 19th century asked questions about an inequity in trade. They sent out cheap goods to Congo, and back came this most expensive wealth that's coming out of the Congo. They said, how can this trade be so unequal? He began to ask questions. And King Leopold of Belgium had come to the international community and said, please help me, fund me to fight slavery. The Arabs are making slaves of the Congolese people. Help us. And people actually around the world supported his campaign to end slavery. And in fact, he was using that money to enslave the Congolese people for his own profit. And King Leopold's Ghost is the story of how one man led a campaign for over 30 years to bring down the government of King Leopold and put an end to the exploitation of this country. He had the courage to look into what was really driving the economy. What is the mechanics of this? And I think it's a privilege to stand in front of a group like you who do have the understanding of how the economy works. I don't. I have nothing to suggest to you, but I just want to launch this challenge to you. Look deeper, find ways to control and to regulate this global economy, because I see the results every day. I see it in the bodies of women. I see it in the starvation of the children. I can't do anything, but you can. So that is where I would like to leave it. I think our right to a decent income must not be bought at the price of someone else's destitution. Thank you.